All right, so we're wrapping up this series today. We're looking at Philippians chapter 4 today, and just a reminder that kind of the encouragement throughout this, because we only have 25, 30 minutes that we look at this each and every week, is to read along with us throughout the week. So if you haven't done that, it's pretty easy to do because there's only 4 chapters. You can do that this week, and there's just so much in this book, in this letter, that we just don't have time to unpack on a Saturday. So I'd encourage you to be reading along. But what we're going to see here in Philippians chapter 4 is Paul's going to address an issue that I think a lot of us face. He's going to address an issue that I think is common with almost everybody in this country. And that's the issue of being content. Now here's the reality. The reality is that we are one of, if not the most well-off country, nation, in all of human history. The reality is we have a lot of stuff, right? We have a lot of stuff. I try to go for a walk or so every day, and as I go walks the past week, things are warming up. People are doing their spring cleaning. They have their garage doors open, right? And what is every garage full of? Stuff. Full of stuff. We have so much stuff. And I know it can feel like a lot of us, we don't have a lot because we look at the person across the street, the person over there, and they got more stuff. They got nicer stuff. They got a better car, a bigger house, bigger toys, whatever. But the reality is all of us have a lot of stuff, especially compared to people around the world, especially compared to people throughout history. We have a lot of stuff. And yet, despite the amount of stuff that we have, we are some of the most discontent and joyless people as a whole around the world. We've bought into the lie that if we just get more, then we'll be happy, then we'll be satisfied, then we'll be content. But really what's happened is the opposite. The more we get, the more discontent, the more less joy we have, the less peace we have. And we've bought into these basically marketing lies that if we get this thing, right? Every ad you see on TV tells you what your life is missing. Everything you see on Facebook in between the posts of your friends, all those ads on Google or wherever you're at, those are all telling you something your life is missing. If you just had this car, your life would be better. If you just take this pill, your life would be better. If you just had this relationship, ate this candy bar, drank this beer, whatever it is, all these things are telling you if you just do these things, you'll be happy. You'll be satisfied. But the reality is the opposite has happened. And even though we're going to spend millions this year trying to find the right product, the right thing that will make us content, the vast majority of us are going to wake up in 2024 more discontent than we are now. We have a problem with being discontent. We have a problem with being content. And listen, this is a tough message for me because I'm no different. I find myself discontent in life most of the time. I look at the things that I want, the things I want to achieve, the places I want to be, and I get discontent with where I'm at because I'm not where I want to be. So this is something I struggle with too, and here's a tough lesson that I've learned. If I'm not content with where I'm at and what I have now, I won't become content whenever I get fill in the blank, whatever it is that I'm after. I've tried that before. It doesn't work. I've pursued all these other things, and when I got them, I wasn't content. And I think the same is true for you. You won't, if you aren't content with what you have and where you're at now, you won't become content whenever you get whatever it is that you're chasing after. I mean, you might find temporary satisfaction in a new job, a new car, a new relationship, more money, more power, more fame, more whatever. You might find temporary satisfaction, but after a week, a month, a year, it'll fade. It'll lose its shine, and you'll find yourself discontent again. I mean, just look at the people around us that have it all, right? You don't have to like football to understand this, but Tom Brady, right? The greatest quarterback arguably of all time. And not just in football, but in sports. And often when he was still playing, which maybe he will again, who knows, but when he was still playing, at a post-game interview, after the game is played, especially towards the end of the season, he would get asked a question. Hey, what ring is your favorite? Which championship was your favorite? And he would always smirk and say, the next one. This guy has accomplished more than anybody else in his sport, and he was chronically discontent. Chronically discontent. And it's not just in the world of sports. I mean, look in the world of entertainment. I mean, you have people like Elvis and Michael Jackson and Prince. You know what they all struggled with? Chronic depression. And I'm not necessarily talking about the mental illness side, although there certainly was those issues going on as well. I'm talking about the chronic discontentment with their life. And what's concerning is a lot of the people we look up to and be like, man, it would be so great if I just had millions of dollars lying around. It would be so great if I had all this fame, if I had all this power, if I had all these accomplishments, if people looked up to me as like the greatest in my field. We think it would be great if those things happened to us, but the people that we look up to, they're discontent as we are. Because if we're not content with what we have and where we're at now, we won't become content when we get those things. And sometimes we think like, yeah, that sounds great, but like, give me the $1 million and let me see, right? Give me that fame, give me that power, let me see. But we can look at the people that have it. And if they weren't content first, they won't become content later. So here's the question I want to wrestle with today as we look at Philippians chapter 4. And the question is this: what if it's not our physical circumstances that drive our contentment? What if our physical circumstances, what we're going through, what we have, how much we make, whether we have a family or a spouse or not, what our house is like, what if the circumstances of our life aren't actually what make us content? Because Paul, the author of Philippians, what he's going to show us is a different way to live. And we're going to dive into Philippians chapter 4 in a minute. You can turn there in preparation. But what we need to be reminded of before we look at these verses is the context in which they're written in. Because many of us would look at a guy like Paul and we think, man, that guy's kind of not got a lot of going for him right now. Because he wrote this letter from jail. Like he's in chains for Christ. This dude's been beaten and shipwrecked and ridiculed and mocked. Like we'd look at him and be like, I don't know if I want that. Because that doesn't seem really great to me. But in this midst of this letter and these difficulties, he's saying like, rejoice. And he reflects on his life. He's had some good moments and some bad moments, but it's important for us to remember when he's writing this, he's not like sitting on the porch of his mansion overlooking the Mediterranean, eating a great meal. No, he's sitting on this, laying on his back under arrest for his faith in Christ. And I think this perspective helps us understand these words a little bit better. Because he's telling us that whatever we're going through, it's possible to experience what he's experiencing. And that's why he's able to write this in Philippians 4, chapter 12. I know what it is to be in need. He's in need as he writes this. And I know what it is to have plenty. He's saying, I've had plenty before. And I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. See, Paul knew what it meant to be content in whatever situation he was in, whether it was good, bad, or somewhere in between. If he had plenty, he was content with that. He didn't need more. If he was hungry and didn't know where his next meal was coming from, he was okay. He was content with that. He did not need anything to be content. So today we're going to look at the verses preceding this to see what Paul teaches us about how we can live this way, because I think we all really want to be content, right? I think we're all kind of tired of searching and chasing after that next thing, going from thing to thing to thing, hoping that this next thing will finally satisfy us. I think that's tiring and exhausting, and Paul's going to show us a better way to live. So let's rewind a little bit, and we'll go verse by verse through this, and we'll go start in Philippians chapter 4, verse 4. From his jail cell, Paul writes this: rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. I mean, that sounds really nice, doesn't it? Sounds like something you'd put on like your wall at home, like something Hobby Lobby would carry in that nice little picture frame, something you'd see on a Christian coffee mug or a Thomas Kincaid painting, like rejoice, right? It just seems like something you'd hear from the Bible. But I dare you, the next time you have a friend that's struggling, that's going through something, to just pull this verse out and see what happens, right? Go up to them and be like, I know you're struggling, but rejoice. My guess is that alone probably isn't going to solve very many problems. You might get decked in the face, right? Because I think we have kind of the wrong understanding of this. I mean, we look at this and we say, Paul, wait a minute. You want me to rejoice? I just lost my job. I don't know where my next paycheck's going to come from. And I think Paul's saying, yeah, you're supposed to rejoice in that. But Paul, you're telling me I might lose my house. Yeah, rejoice. Paul, what about my doctor? He just called and I got news that's not so great. What am I supposed to do? And Paul's saying, rejoice. But Paul, what about when I lose my marriage, when my friends abandon me, when I get stabbed in the back, when my kids are sick, when life just isn't working out the way that I wanted it to? He's saying, I'll say it again. Rejoice. But here's the catch. Paul isn't saying to rejoice because our circumstances are bad. He's not saying to rejoice because we should be happy about these bad things happening. He's saying rejoice because God is still good. God is still in control. So our circumstances, not that they don't matter, but that God is bigger than what we're going through. And if we look to him, we can look past our circumstances. You see, what we often do is we look at what's going on around us. And if it's going good, we celebrate, right? If it's going bad, we mourn. But Paul is challenging us here to shift our focus. Don't look at our circumstances, but look at the one who is over our circumstances. Or maybe you're thinking like, yeah, right, how am I supposed to do that? But Paul didn't just tell us to do that. He did this. He's lived this way. He's had a difficult life, and now from experience, he's saying, this is possible for you too. Do you want to be content? Do you want to find joy? Do you want to find peace? Do you want your circumstances to not dictate how your life is going? I know the way. That's what Paul is inviting us into, and I think that's what we're all searching for, isn't it? I mean, wouldn't that be great for us to find joy and peace and contentment? Not based on what's going on around us, not based on what's going on in culture or around the world, but based in something more secure. Because I suspect deep down that's what we all want. We all want joy and peace. We're just looking for it in the wrong places. And in this last part of the letter, Paul is explaining what he means, and he continues on in verse 5. He says, let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. So first, in verse 4, he tells us to rejoice, and then he says, let your gentleness be evident. And you might look at first glance like these two verses don't really seem to go together. Seems like he kind of shifted gears here, but he really didn't. I looked into what the word gentleness means, and some of your translations might read reasonableness, but really a better understanding of this word, because originally it was written in Greek and then translated into English, our Bibles today. And sometimes like words kind of get lost because of your ancient language to a modern language. But a better word here would probably be tolerance. And a true definition of tolerance, despite how our culture's kind of twisted that up a little bit, a true definition would be to recognize and respect what others believe and do without agreeing with what they believe or do. So what's Paul saying here? He's saying that when you disagree with God, when you go, God, I don't really like what you're doing over here. I don't really understand this. God, I think we should go a different way. When we disagree with God, which we all will, we should be tolerant. Now, I'm not saying that we should be tolerant because God is wrong. I'm saying we should be tolerant because we are often wrong. And God is leading us someplace we just can't see because we are limited views. So when God is leading us into circumstances that don't make sense or circumstances that are difficult, we should be tolerant or reasonable, understanding that we can't see what God can see. And there will come a day where the curtain is reversed, where the roles are flipped, not the roles, but where we get to see the other side of the story, and we can see how God has led us through. Paul is saying, in the moments that don't make sense, that are difficult, don't pull away from God. And in the next breath, he says, the Lord is near. The Lord is near. He's with us. When your world collapses, when life isn't going as planned, when things get difficult, God is with you. He's not abandoned you, even though it might feel like it at some points. He is with you. I love how David in the Psalms, which is a great place to go whenever you feel like God's abandoned you or life is difficult. David in Psalm 34 says this, the righteous cry out and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The righteous person may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from them all. He protects all his bones. Not one of them will be broken. Listen, wherever you are, whatever you're going through, the difficulties, the joys, whatever, God is with you. He's close beside you, and that's one of the reasons we can rejoice. God never promised us an easy life. He never promised us it would be smooth sailing. In fact, he promised the opposite. But what he did promise was that he would be with us every step of the way, and that's what Paul is saying. And Paul continues in verse 6. It says this, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. I wonder how many of us can say that we're not anxious about anything. This word anxious is interesting. Being anxious means giving attention or concern to things that bring significant disruption to personality or mind. You see, our anxiousness, our worry is the thing that's weighing so many of us down. We worry about all these things that are out of our control. And what Paul is saying here is he's saying that kind of mindset is disruptive to our relationship with God. And I'll speak for myself here. I worry about things because I like to be in control. I like to be in the driver's seat. I like to set the course. I like to set the pace. And when God says, no, I think I'm going to do that for you now, I start to worry. I worry about all the things that are out of my control, all the things that I want to control. And I get anxious about things like, God, when are you going to do this? I don't know if you know this, God, but this needs to happen over here. And I start telling him what to do because I want to control things. And you know what that does? It robs me of my joy. It keeps me from being content. It keeps me from finding peace. And when you think about it, worrying about those kinds of things, it's really arrogant behavior, isn't it? Because when I worry, I'm thinking that I can do it better than God can. My timing is better than his. And what Paul is saying is saying, stop worrying, give it to God. Stop worrying and give it to God. So what is it that you worry about? Is it money, bills, your next family get-together, your health? Listen, if you're asking a lot of what-if questions, you probably have some worry in your life. And what Paul is saying here is what you need to do is you need to take that worry, give it to God. Take that worry, give it to God. And it's not a one-time thing. For me, that's sometimes like a daily thing where I just take my worry and I give it to God. God, I'm worried about this again. Will you take that? Take my worry, give it to God. And what he does is he gives us peace in return. Now, I need to acknowledge something here because there's some of us, or I would say all of us at some point in our life, struggle with a more serious mental illness where we need help navigating some of that stuff. And prayer is a great first place to start, but sometimes we need professional help to help us navigate what's going on inside our head. And I'm a pretty strong believer that I think every single person needs counseling at some point in their life. I've received counseling several times, and I think everybody needs it at some point in their life. And so some of us, even though we might just say, well, I'm going to pray and give it to God, we just still can't quite get over that hump. We can't quite get past those thoughts, and that's the time where we need to get somebody else to come in and to help us navigate those thoughts and those feelings. And if that's you, we have some counselors in the area that I would be more than happy to give you the names and recommendations for. But what Paul is saying here, he's saying that we can get peace that replaces our worry. But to get that, we have to take our worries and give it to God. And that doesn't mean that our problems always go away. It means that we give God our worry and let him deal with it rather than trying to take it on ourselves. So if you want to be content in every situation, if you want to find that peace, if you want to be able to rejoice, then you need to present the situations you worry about to God first. Because when we worry, all it does is rob us and keep us from being content. Paul continues with a promise in verse 7. It says this, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind. See, if we do this, if we present our request to God, we will have peace. We will have peace that transcends understanding. In other words, we can have peace in situations we should not have peace in because God is in control. And we're placing our hope in him so we can have peace even when it doesn't make sense. And Paul says he will guard our hearts. Guard our hearts from what? He'll guard our hearts from all the things that rob us of our joy. He'll guard our hearts from all the things that we worry about. And what Paul's saying here in this passage is it's Jesus who can make us content. It's not food, it's not money, it's not power, it's not a bigger house, a fancier car, a job, a relationship, because all those things, they can change on a dime. They can be here today and gone tomorrow. But the one thing that's secure is Jesus. I know some of us, myself included, we're tempted to think, yeah, but I need Jesus plus this, right? But every time we try that way, it doesn't lead us to the life we think it does. It robs us of our joy. Paul's saying if you're tired of that, if you're tired of hopping to thing to thing to thing to thing, hoping that the next thing will fulfill you, Jesus is the better way. Give that a try. And all this is why Paul was able to end his letter saying this, verse 10. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Here's, I think, the question that we should wrestle with. Can we say that? Can we say that? That we are content in any and every situation, whether we're well-fed or hungry, whether we have our dream job or working some job we hate, whether we have all the relationships we want or none of the relationships. Can we say that we're content in any and every situation as long as we have Jesus? Because I think that's the question Paul's asking. He's saying, listen, if you are tired of going the other way and putting your hope in all these other things and finding that robs you of your joy, try Jesus. And for followers of Jesus, we should ask ourselves, can we say this? Can we say what Paul said? And if you're not following Jesus, this is the invitation that Jesus extends us. Follow me, not for an easy life, but follow me to find deep-seated joy and peace that's not based in your circumstances, but it's based in what I've done for you. Let's switch gears here, and I want to make the application of this real simple and real practical, and just give you two things that you can take from this. The first one is for when you're in the good times. When you're in the good times, worship the giver and not the gift. Worship the giver and not the gift. If there's something good in your life, the Bible tells us that came from God. If it's a relationship, if it's money, if it's a house, a vacation, a car, whatever it is, a pretty sunset, if there's something good in your life, it came from God. But what we tend to do is rather than taking that good thing and worshiping the one who gave us, we worship the gift. Be like if I gave my 4-year-old a toy, and rather than saying thank you to me, he just started worshiping the toy, right? I'd probably get a little upset. Because that toy didn't do anything for him. I gave him, I went through the work, I paid the money, I probably wouldn't wrap it up, but I'd at least give it to him, right? I did all the work, and now he's worshiping the gift. But so often that's what we do with God. We say, we don't thank the giver of the gift, we end up worshiping the gift. And so one practice we have in our family when my son goes to bed every night is we just list some things we're thankful for. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be big. It can be something small. I'm thankful for an evening in the backyard. I'm thankful for the sunset. I'm thankful for the meal we ate. And what I've found is even on like the really bad days, there's still a couple really good things that happened. It's just so often we let all the other bad stuff overshadow the good stuff. And when God gives us a good gift, that should bring us back to him, and we should worship the giver of that gift. So in the good times, when things are going well in life, look for ways that you can take those gifts that God has given you and worship him for that, rather than focusing on the gifts. Now, some of us, we're not in a good season, and at some point, all of us will go into the next storm at some point. So in the bad times, what we need to do is daily give our worries to God. Daily give our worries to God. We can't let those worries eat us alive and consume us. We got to daily give those worries to God. Paul says by prayer and petition. In other words, we keep doing it over and over and over again. Every time we're worried, we say, God, I'm worried about this. Here, take it. God, I'm worried about this. Here, take it. God, I'm worried about this. Give me peace. And we just have to keep giving it to him and allowing his peace to come over us. It's not a one-time deal. And in difficult seasons, it can be something we just constantly do. We need to give our worries to God because he cares about us. And he's the one that can handle them better than we can anyway. And so when we give our worries to God, we can find that peace. We need to get alone with God. and allow him to encourage us. That's what Paul did. Paul would not have been able to get through his shipwrecks and his beatings and his jails, and eventually, soon after this, he's going to be beheaded in Rome. Dude didn't have an easy life, but he was able to rejoice because he got alone with God and gave God his worries. Listen, there's going to be good times in your life and there's going to be bad times. And in the good times, if you do this, if you apply this passage, they're going to become richer. They're going to become more meaningful because you're using the gifts God's given you in the way they're intended to be used to point you back to him. And in the bad times, will become sustainable because you can put your hope in the one who will not disappoint, who will get you through. I know we're going to go from here and we're going to get bombarded with all these promises that if we just buy these products and do these things, then we'll be happy. But my encouragement as we leave this place is to not buy into that lie. If we have this, whatever that is for you, then you'll be happy. But to look to Jesus instead and let him be the one that satisfies you and that helps you find peace and joy. And I think that's the secret to being content. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for just what you're doing in our lives. And God, we thank you that you didn't leave us alone, that you came on this earth, that you walked in our shoes, and that you made a way for us to enter back into relationship with you. And God, I pray that we might be a church, we might be a people that doesn't look to the things the world says we need to be happy, but looks to you. God, I pray that we might be a people that is content, regardless of what we have or what we don't have. But we can be content in you and who you are and what you've done for us. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.